Welcome students. This is again a new video for measurement of national income using expenditure method. ठीक है, तो आज हम ये समझेंगे कि एक्सपेंडिचर मेथड को कैसे यूज किया जाता है नेशनल इनकम के लिए। सबसे पहले आप लॉजिक समझो, किसी एक का एक्सपेंडिचर किसी और के लिए क्या है, इनकम, राइट। तो अगर हमने सभी का एक्सपेंडिचर्स जान लिया, समझ लिया, इफ वी कम टू नो अबाउट कि एक्सपेंडिचर इसका है, या मतलब जिसका भी एक्सपेंडिचर्स को हम ऐड कर दें, तो एक्सपेंडिचर्स को ऐड करके जो हमें रिजल्ट मिलेगा दैट विल बी इनकम, बिकॉज समवन स्पेंडिंग मनी इज समवन एल्स इनकम। ये आपको ध्यान में रखना है, राइट। सो एक्सपेंडिचर मेथड के कंपोनेंट्स क्या क्या होते हैं? कैन एनीवन गेस? जस्ट आई एम गिविंग यू 2 सेकंड 3 सेकंड, जस्ट गेस। एक्सपेंडिचर मेथड के कंपोनेंट्स, एक प्राइवेट फाइनल कंजम्पशन एक्सपेंडिचर, राइट, उसको हम लोग पर्सनल भी बोल सकते हैं, पर्सनल फाइनल कंजम्पशन एक्सपेंडिचर। नेक्स्ट इज गवर्नमेंट फाइनल कंजम्पशन एक्सपेंडिचर। देन वी हैव ग्रॉस डोमेस्टिक कैपिटल फॉर्मेशन या फिर ग्रॉस इन्वेस्टमेंट, एंड द फोर्थ वन इज नेट एक्सपोर्ट्स। तो ये चार कंपोनेंट जो हैं, ऑल दीज 4 कंपोनेंट्स व्हेन एडेड, दैट इज PFCE, गवर्नमेंट फाइनल कंजम्पशन एक्सपेंडिचर, दैट इज GFCE, and then we have gross domestic capital formation, GDFC you can say, and net exports, we get GDP at market price. Okay, so let's see it in details. So expenditure method, GDP at MP, that is an important aggregate. We get by adding private final consumption expenditure, government final consumption expenditure, gross domestic capital formation, which is also known as gross investment, and net exports, that is export minus imports, right. Now we are going to study each component in details. So first is private final consumption expenditure. Now you can see that private final, so we are marking what? Private. So when we are talking about private, it is household expenditures, that is हमारा day to day expenditure, very common, it is known as roti kapra makan, right, the basic food, shelter and clothing. Then expenditure of NGOs, that is non-governmental organizations, that is also an expenditure. So these two subcomponents added up to form private final consumption expenditure. Then we have government final consumption expenditure. Now you have to be very careful that we are talking about the consumption expenditure, not the investment expenditure. So in this component you will be getting consumption, just say day-to-day expenses of government in the form of wages and salaries, in the form of various transfer expenditures, scholarships and all, utility bills and all. So there are various type of expenditures which are not investment expenditure, just the consumption expenditures, right. So this comes under government final consumption expenditure. The next we have gross domestic capital formation, or it is known as gross investment. So we are coming now to investment. The previous 2 components were related to consumption, but this component is investment. So when we are talking about investment, you have to be very careful because it has got some components, sub-components, even further divided and categorized. So you have to see gross domestic capital formation. The first subcomponent is fixed. Be very careful. This word fixed is there. So we are talking about the fixed investment, which is a subcomponent of gross domestic capital formation. So under this fixed, what are the subcomponents? Business fixed investment, like for example, business investing in warehouses, buildings, premises and all. Public investment, when we are talking about public investments, means investment by government in the form of railways, roads, dams, etc. All these are public investments, that is investment by government. Then we have residential constructions. Now there are big housings, residential complexes, apartments, townships and all. Yeah, even a small simple home, a small building, okay, but that also comes under the fixed investment. So you have to think, whenever expenditures are made, this becomes income for someone else. Now here is the catch point. You have to understand, जब भी यहाँ पर एक्सपेंडिचर हो रहा है इन चीजों पर, किसी न किसी के लिए तो इनकम है ना ये। तो इसलिए लॉजिक ये है कि एक्सपेंडिचर मेथड से अगर हमें एक्सपेंसेस पता चलते हैं तो वो एक्सपेंडिचर किसी के लिए इनकम है, राइट? आई एम रिपीटिंग इट वेरियस टाइम्स. Then we have inventory investment. Now under inventory investment we have got change in stock. Now what is the meaning of change in stock? Previously we have done. Change in stock is, closing stocks minus opening stock. So this difference is change in stock, or you can say inventory investment. So these sums up to gross domestic capital formation. Then finally we have net exports. Now when we are talking about net exports, okay, so we have to understand that this exports, imports. Now exports and imports mean you see net export. Now why net exports? We are subtracting imports. So you see it's a negative sign out here. What is the meaning of this? Whenever we are talking about expenditure method, we are talking about expenditure on the domestically produced goods. Now who is incurring that expenditure? It can be anyone, private final, we have studied it under private sector, government sector, in the form of investment. Similarly, जब फॉरेनर हमारे गुड्स पे एक्सपेंडिचर करता है तो हम उसको बोलते हैं एक्सपोर्ट्स. मतलब दैट मीन्स वी आर एक्सपोर्टिंग, दैट मीन्स उन्होंने हमारे गुड्स पे स्पेंड करने का सोचा, मतलब लाइक दे आर प्लानिंग टू spend or they have already spent. That is exports. Now why we are subtracting imports? Because import means it indicates that we are spending on their goods, that is not on the domestically produced goods of our country, rather we are spending or planning to spend on the goods produced in their country. So when we are spending on the goods produced in their country, that is not contributing India's GDP. If you are talking India as a domestic economy, that's why import is subtracted. That means it is reducing the opportunity of increase in India's GDP. So export is increasing India's GDP, import is decreasing India's GDP. Remember that, right? So we have net export as exports minus imports. Now finally, when we have all these items, that is private final consumption expenditure, government final consumption expenditure, gross domestic capital formation, and net exports, we get GDP at market price. Okay, now one word of caution. If in the question, if it is net, for example, by anyhow it is given in the question, or you arrive that it is net, so the impact will be that it will be net. If it is net, then this will also be net. Otherwise there is no chance that you are going to get the result in FC. It will always be in MP, and it will always be in domestic form, because we are talking about expenditure on the domestically produced goods. So this is fixed, this will always be domestic, and we are talking about expenditure on the basis of market price, because whenever we spend on the we spend on the goods based on market price, not factor cost. So it is always market price and domestic, but the first letter, that is G, can be net if it is net out here. You have to be very careful about that. So in the equation form, we can say to arrive at national income, first we have calculated GDP at market price. Then simply we know, in order to convert from gross to net, we have to subtract depreciation. In order to arrive to FC, we have to subtract NIT. And finally, from domestic to national, we have to add NFIA. So gross to net by subtracting depreciation, MP to FC by subtracting NIT, net indirect tax, and finally domestic to national, we are adding NFIA. So we'll continue more topics in the next video. Till then, take care. Bye.